The morning that changed everything started like any other in the Galactic Council chambers. HFY adjusted her ceremonial robes as she glided through the corridors of the massive space station that served as the heart of interstellar governance. The Altarian diplomat had represented her people for over 3 centuries, watching countless species join the Council, prosper under its guidance, and find their place among the stars. But today felt different. The corridors seemed quieter than usual, and the usual buzz of diplomatic chatter was replaced by an unsettling tension that made her crystalline skin shimmer with unease. "Have you seen the humans today?" asked Corval, a bulky Thraxian delegate whose 4 arms gestured nervously as he approached. His usually confident demeanor was replaced by something HFY had rarely seen from a species: uncertainty. "No, why would that matter?" HFY replied, though she already suspected the answer. The humans have been increasingly absent from council sessions over the past few months. At first, everyone assumed it was typical human unpredictability. They were, after all, one of the youngest species to join the council, barely 200 years since first contact. They missed the 3rd consecutive session yesterday. Corval continued, his massive frame blocking other delegates as they tried to pass. Ambassador Chen hasn't responded to any communications. Neither have any of the other human representatives. This was unusual, even for humans. Despite their reputation for being emotional and impulsive, they had always maintained their diplomatic obligations. Sarah Chun, in particular, had been a fixture in the council chambers for the past 20 years. Her passionate speeches about human potential and their desire to contribute to galactic civilization had become legendary, even if they often fell on deaf ears. The truth was, most council members viewed humans as an amusing curiosity rather than serious partners. They were technologically inferior, politically fragmented, and suffered from an embarrassingly short lifespan that made long-term planning nearly impossible. The fact that they had achieved faster-than-light travel at all was considered something of a miracle, though most attributed it to luck rather than genuine innovation. "Perhaps they're finally accepting their place," suggested Veltar, a serpentine Nexari whose species prided themselves on their logical approach to everything. "They must realize that their contributions to the council have been minimal." HFY felt a flutter of discomfort at the casual dismissal. While it was true that humans hadn't made significant technological contributions to the council's collective knowledge, there had been something compelling about their determination. Their representatives always spoke with such conviction about their species' potential, even when faced with obvious evidence of their limitations. The council chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive spherical room that could accommodate delegates from hundreds of different species. Gravity fields, atmospheric zones, and environmental controls created perfect conditions for every member race. At the center, a holographic display showed the current session agenda, while smaller displays around the room provided real-time translation and cultural context for the diverse assembly. Today's session was focused on the allocation of mining rights in the Vega sector, a routine matter that would typically generate hours of debate. The Carithian Mining Consortium had submitted a proposal that would grant them exclusive access to the resource-rich asteroid belt, promising to share profits according to the standard council formula. But as the session began, the empty section reserved for human delegates became increasingly conspicuous. Other species began to whisper among themselves, and HFY noticed that many kept glancing toward the vacant seats. "Perhaps we should postpone the vote until the humans can participate," she suggested during a brief recess. The suggestion was met with barely concealed amusement from her colleagues. Thekmore, the elderly Zavari who served as council moderator, fixed her with his 6 compound eyes in what she had learned was their equivalent of a condescending smile. "My dear HFY, while your concern for our junior members is admirable, we cannot allow their absence to disrupt council business. The humans have never expressed interest in mining operations anyway. Their industrial capacity is far too limited to be relevant to such discussions." This was true, technically. Human space consisted of perhaps a dozen star systems, with a total population that wouldn't fill a single Corinthian city. Their ships were primitive, their energy production minimal, and their understanding of advanced physics was centuries behind the Council average. They were members more out of courtesy than necessity. Still, something about their absence bothered Zexhai. In all her centuries of diplomatic service, she had learned to trust her instincts about people and situations. The humans might be technologically backward, but they had always been eager to participate, to learn, to contribute whatever they could. Their sudden silence felt wrong. The vote on the Vega mining rights proceeded without incident. The Corinthians won their exclusive contract, as everyone had expected. The profits would be distributed according to each member species' contribution to the Council's collective infrastructure, with the humans receiving the minimum allocation reserved for junior members. But, as delegates began filing out of the chamber, an urgent communication alert echoed through the station's public address system. Emergency messages were rare in Council space, protected as it was by the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy. All delegates, please report to Emergency Assembly Hall 7 immediately. Announced the station's AI in the comm, measured tones that somehow made urgent situations seem even more ominous. Priority Alpha communication incoming from the Outer Rim monitoring stations. Emergency Assembly Hall 7 was smaller and more intimate than the main council chamber, designed for crisis situations that required rapid decision-making. As delegates hurried to their assigned positions, Zexhai noticed that the human section remained conspicuously empty. Whatever this emergency was, they would face it without human input or perspective. The holographic display at the center of the hall activated, showing the worried face of Commander Yolhassen, a Nextary officer who managed the automated monitoring stations that kept watch over Council space borders. His typically composed features were marked by what could only be described as confusion and concern. "Honored delegates," he began, "we have a situation that requires immediate attention. 3 hours ago, our monitoring stations detected massive energy readings from human space. At first, we assumed it was some kind of industrial accident or perhaps a misguided attempt at weapons testing." The assembled delegates murmured among themselves. Human weapons technology was laughably primitive by Council standards, consisting mainly of chemical explosives and crude nuclear devices. The idea that they could produce energy readings significant enough to trigger automated monitoring systems was almost absurd. However, Commander Yolhassen continued, "Upon closer investigation, we discovered that the energy signatures were not from weapons or accidents. They appear to be from transportation technology." This brought immediate silence to the hall. Transportation technology was one of the most heavily regulated aspects of Council membership. Faster-than-light travel required sophisticated understanding of subspace mechanics, and the energy requirements were enormous. Most species took centuries to develop reliable interstellar travel, and even then, it was carefully monitored to prevent accidents that could affect neighboring systems. "Sir, with respect," called out Delegate Morgan from the Hegemony of Worlds, "human transportation technology is barely capable of moving between their local star systems. They have exactly 17 functioning faster-than-light vessels, all of them built with technology licensed from Council members. Are you certain your instruments aren't malfunctioning?" Commander Yolhassen's expression grew even more troubled. "That's exactly why this situation is so concerning. According to our readings, every human colony, every space station, every settlement in their territory has simply vanished." The silence that followed was profound. Even the ambient humming of the station's life support systems seemed to fade as delegates struggled to process this information. "Vanished?" Thekmore's voice carried a note of disbelief. "You mean destroyed?" "No, sir. Vanished. Gone. There are no debris fields, no energy residue consistent with destruction, no distress signals. Every human presence in their territory has disappeared simultaneously, leaving only empty space and silent worlds." Zexhai felt a chill run through her crystalline form. The implications of such technology were staggering. The ability to relocate entire populations across interstellar distances was beyond even the most advanced council members. The energy requirements alone would be equivalent to the output of multiple stars. That's impossible, declared Veltar with typical Nexary certainty. No species possesses technology capable of such an undertaking. The humans certainly don't. They must have suffered some kind of catastrophic event that our instruments are misinterpreting. But Commander Yolhassen was shaking his head. We've run every possible diagnostic and analysis. Our conclusion is that the humans have somehow evacuated their entire civilization from known space. Every man, woman, and child. Every ship, station, and structure. They're gone. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical force. If the humans possess technology capable of relocating entire civilizations, then everything the Council thought it knew about them was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. How is that possible? Whispered Corval, his massive frame seeming to shrink as the reality of the situation sank in. We monitored their technology development. We knew their capabilities. They were centuries behind us in every meaningful metric. Perhaps, suggested Zexhai quietly, we didn't know them as well as we thought. This observation hung in the air like an accusation. The Council's entire relationship with humanity had been built on assumptions of superiority, of benevolent guidance offered to a primitive but promising species. If those assumptions were wrong, then what else had they missed? We need to send investigation teams immediately, declared Thekmore, his authority reasserting itself as he struggled to regain control of the situation. Whatever happened to the humans, we need to understand it. If they've developed technology beyond our capabilities, we need to know how and why. And if they haven't, asked Zexhai, what if something else happened to them? Something that could threaten the rest of us? It was a possibility none of them wanted to consider, but it had to be addressed. The universe was vast and largely unexplored, filled with phenomena that even the Council's advanced science couldn't fully explain. The sudden disappearance of an entire civilization could indicate the presence of something far more dangerous than technological advancement. Investigation teams will determine that, Thekmore replied firmly. Commander Yolhassen prepared detailed reports on the energy readings and coordinate with the science division. I want every piece of data analyzed and cross-referenced with known phenomena. Already in progress, sir, the commander replied. However, I should mention that our attempts to contact Earth or any human facility have been unsuccessful. It's as if their entire communication network has been disconnected from galactic subspace. This added another layer of mystery to the situation. Galactic communication relied on subspace networks that connected every member civilization. Even if the humans had evacuated their space, their communication systems should still be detectable unless they had been deliberately shut down or somehow moved beyond the range of current technology. How long do we estimate until the investigation teams can reach human space? Asked Delegate Vorthak, a methodical Kandorian whose species specialized in crisis management. Approximately 18 standard days, Commander Yolhassen replied. The nearest council vessels are currently stationed at the Procyon listening post. They'll need time to prepare for what could be a dangerous situation. 18 days. In that time, whatever had happened to the humans could spread to other systems or reveal itself as an even greater threat. The Council's careful order, maintained for millennia, suddenly felt fragile and uncertain. In the meantime, Thekmore continued, we need to consider our response options. If the humans have developed advanced technology, we need to understand whether they pose a threat to Council security. If something else has happened to them, we need to prepare our defenses. It was a rational approach, but Zexhai couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. The humans had never shown any signs of hostility toward the Council. If anything, they had been almost desperately eager to prove themselves worthy of membership. Their sudden disappearance felt less like aggression than like disappointment. The thought struck her like a physical blow. Had the Council's dismissive treatment of humanity driven them to this dramatic gesture? Had their condescending attitudes and casual disregard finally pushed the humans to demonstrate their true capabilities? Delegate Zexhai, you seem troubled, observed Thekmore, his compound eyes focusing on her with uncomfortable intensity. Do you have something to add to our discussion? She hesitated, knowing that her suspicions would be unwelcome. The Council's members took great pride in their enlightened approach to interspecies relations, their careful guidance of younger civilizations. The idea that their treatment of humanity might have been fundamentally flawed would challenge the very foundation of their collective identity. I'm simply concerned about our missing colleagues, she replied carefully. Ambassador Chun and her staff were dedicated servants of the Council. Their sudden absence suggests something significant has occurred. It was a diplomatic non-answer, but it seemed to satisfy the moderator. The session continued with various delegates offering theories and suggestions, most of which centered on the assumption that some external force had acted upon humanity rather than humanity acting for itself. But as Zexhai listened to the discussions, she found herself remembering her last conversation with Sarachun. The human ambassador had seemed unusually quiet, almost melancholy. When pressed, she had mentioned feeling frustrated by the Council's response to human proposals for joint research projects. We keep offering to share what we have, Chun had said, but sometimes I wonder if anyone is really listening. We're treated like children playing at being adults, tolerated rather than respected. At the time, Zexhai had offered reassuring words about patience and understanding, the standard diplomatic responses to such complaints. But now those words felt hollow, inadequate to address the deeper issues that might have been building beneath the surface of human-council relations. The emergency session concluded with the formation of several investigation committees and the scheduling of daily briefings until the mystery was resolved. But as delegates filed out of the assembly hall, Zexhai remained behind, staring at the empty space where human representatives should have been sitting. Something told her that when the investigation teams reached human space, they wouldn't find evidence of external threats or technological accidents. They would find something far more troubling. Proof that the Council had fundamentally misunderstood one of its own members, with consequences that might extend far beyond a few empty star systems. The silence in the hall felt oppressive, weighted with implications that none of them were prepared to face. Humanity had departed in silence, leaving behind only questions and the growing realization that the galactic community might have lost something far more valuable than they had ever realized. As Zexhai finally made her way back to her quarters, she couldn't escape the feeling that this was only the beginning. The humans had been trying to tell them something for decades, and the Council had simply refused to listen. Now they were gone, and the cost of that failure was about to become clear. The first day had ended, but the true reckoning was just beginning. The investigation fleet arrived at the Sol system exactly 18 days after the emergency session, though Commander Brixtel of the Council Survey Corps wished it had taken longer. The Carithian officer had commanded exploration missions for over 4 decades, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the sight that greeted his sensors as they dropped out of hyperspace. Earth hung in its orbit like a blue marble suspended in black velvet, exactly as it should be. The moon traced its familiar path around the planet, and the other worlds of the solar system continued their ancient dance around the central star. But something was fundamentally wrong with the picture, something that took several minutes for Brixtel's mind to fully process. There were no cities. Oh, the continents were still there, the oceans still sparkled under Sol's light, and the polar ice caps gleamed white against the blue. But the spiderwebs of light that had marked human civilization for centuries were gone. No artificial illumination pierced the night sides of the planet. No communication signals filled the electromagnetic spectrum. No ships moved between the worlds. Run a full spectrum analysis, Brixtel ordered his science officer, though his voice carried less authority than usual. I want to know exactly what we're looking at. Lieutenant Yexindra, a young Altarian whose crystalline features reflected the strange light of the instrument panels, worked with practiced efficiency. Her preliminary reports had been troubling enough, but seeing the reality firsthand was somehow worse than any data could convey. "Sir, initial scans confirm complete absence of technological signatures," she reported. "No power generation, no manufacturing activity, no transportation networks." But she hesitated, her natural luminescence flickering with confusion. "But what, Lieutenant? The infrastructure is still there, sir. Roads, buildings, industrial complexes. They're all intact, just empty. It's as if the population simply walked away and turned off everything behind them." This was impossible by any standard understanding of civilization. Cities didn't just empty themselves overnight, leaving behind perfectly preserved but lifeless shells. The energy requirements alone for relocating billions of people would have been detected by monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. "Take us closer," Brixtel commanded. "I want surface teams prepared for immediate deployment." The fleet consisted of 5 vessels, each equipped with the most advanced sensor arrays and analysis equipment available to Council science. If answers existed, they would find them. But as the ships moved deeper into the solar system, the mystery only deepened. Mars, which had supported a thriving colony of nearly 500,000 humans, was similarly empty. The domed cities that had taken decades to construct stood like glass bubbles on the red landscape. Their life support systems shut down, but their structures intact. The orbital stations that had served as waypoints for deeper space travel hung silent in their designated positions, their solar panels still collecting energy from the sun, but feeding power to empty corridors and vacant control rooms. "Commander," called Specialist Torgon from his position at the communications console, "I'm detecting something unusual in the asteroid belt." The main screen shifted to display the region between Mars and Jupiter, where humans had established several mining operations. What they saw defied immediate explanation. Massive geometric structures hung in space where the mining stations should have been, not destroyed or damaged, but transformed into something entirely different. The structures were clearly artificial, composed of metals and composites that sparkled with an inner light. They were beautiful in an alien way, like crystalline flowers blooming in the vacuum of space. But they bore no resemblance to any technology in Council databases. "Are those human constructions?" asked Yexandra, her voice barely above a whisper. "Unknown," Brixtel replied, though privately he was beginning to suspect that everything they thought they knew about human capabilities was wrong. "Prepare a detailed scan and analysis. I want to know what those structures are and how they got there." The scans revealed that the mysterious structures were composed of materials that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their molecular structure phasing between states that current physics couldn't adequately explain. They generated no electromagnetic signatures, created no gravitational disturbances, and showed no signs of conventional technology. Yet they clearly served some purpose, positioned as they were at precise points throughout the asteroid belt. "Sir," Yexandra's voice carried a note of awe and uncertainty, "the energy readings from these structures are unlike anything in our databases. They appear to be manipulating space-time itself at a quantum level." Space-time manipulation was theoretical technology that even the most advanced Council species hadn't achieved. The energy requirements were so enormous that most scientists believed it would never be practical outside of laboratory conditions. Yet here were structures that seemed to accomplish it routinely, casually, as if such technology was no more remarkable than basic stellar engineering. "How long would it have taken to construct these?" Brixtel asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. Based on their complexity and the precision of their positioning, Yexandra calculated centuries at minimum. Possibly millennia, depending on the construction methods used. Centuries. The humans had been members of the Council for barely 200 years, and they had been using faster-than-light travel for less time than that. The idea that they had been working on projects of this magnitude while participating in council activities as junior partners was staggering in its implications. "Commander," Torgon called from his station, "we're receiving a transmission. It's unusual." "What do you mean, unusual?" "It's coming from everywhere at once, sir. Every monitoring station, every communications relay, every receiver we have is picking up the same signal simultaneously. But according to our instruments, nothing is transmitting it. Impossible." Communications required point sources, transmission arrays, some kind of technological infrastructure. Signals didn't just appear everywhere at once unless they're being transmitted through subspace itself, Brixtel realized. "Put on speakers." The voice that filled the command center was unmistakably human, but it carried a quality that none of them had ever heard before. It resonated not just through the air, but seemed to vibrate through the hull of the ship, through the bones of everyone listening. When it spoke, reality itself seemed to pay attention. To our former colleagues in the Galactic Council, the voice began, "We hope this message finds you well, though we suspect our departure has raised questions that deserve answers." Brixtel recognized the speaker, Ambassador Sarah Chun, the human diplomat who had represented her species for 2 decades. But there was something different about her voice now, something that suggested vast experiences and knowledge that hadn't been there before. "We understand that our sudden absence may seem mysterious or even threatening. This was not our intention. We simply reached a point where continued participation in the Council was no longer productive for either party." The message continued, but Brixtel found himself focusing on the technical impossibility of what he was hearing. The signal was being received by equipment that was powered down by instruments that weren't even designed for communication. It was as if the words were manifesting directly from the quantum foam of space itself. "For centuries, we have been studying the universe and our place within it. While we appreciated the Council's guidance, we always knew that our path would eventually diverge from yours. The time has come for humanity to pursue its destiny among the stars." The implications hit Brixtel like a physical force. The humans hadn't been primitive junior partners learning from their betters. They had been conducting research and development on a scale that dwarfed Council capabilities, working toward goals that no one had suspected. "We harbor no ill will toward any Council member," Chen's voice continued. "Your civilizations have achieved remarkable things within your chosen parameters. But humanity has always been driven to push beyond established boundaries, to explore possibilities that others might consider impossible or inadvisable." The message was polite, even respectful, but underlying it was a clear statement of technological and perhaps philosophical superiority. The humans weren't asking for permission or forgiveness. They were explaining a decision that had already been made and implemented. "The structures you have no doubt discovered in our former territory serve as monuments to our time in this region of space. They also function as markers for other species who might one day choose to follow a similar path. Consider them an invitation to transcendence, should any of you decide that growth is more important than comfort." Transcendence. The word carried implications that made Brixtel's scales crawl with unease. Throughout galactic history, species that spoke of transcendence typically disappeared from normal space-time, ascending to states of existence that others couldn't comprehend or contact. It was considered a natural but troubling end state for sufficiently advanced civilizations. "We have relocated to regions of space where we can continue our development without inadvertently affecting your established order," the message explained. "Our research into the fundamental nature of reality has reached a point where our presence might disrupt the stability that you have worked so hard to maintain." This was perhaps the most disturbing revelation yet. The humans were suggesting that their technological advancement had progressed so far that their mere presence could threaten established civilization. What kind of power were they wielding? What had they discovered that made them dangerous simply by existing? To those individuals who showed us friendship and respect during our time in the Council, please know that your kindness was appreciated and will be remembered. To those who viewed us as curiosities or junior partners, we understand your perspective and bear no resentment. Everyone acts according to their nature and understanding. Brixtell found himself thinking of the countless council sessions where human proposals had been politely dismissed, where their representatives had been treated with the kind of condescending patience reserved for enthusiastic children. Had they been sitting there, already possessing technology that could reshape reality, watching their supposed superiors debate matters that must have seemed trivial in comparison? The universe is vast and filled with wonders that we are only beginning to understand, Chen's voice continued. We encourage the Council to continue its important work of maintaining stability and cooperation among the younger civilizations. This is a noble calling, and one that serves a necessary function in the cosmic order. Younger civilizations. The phrase stung more than any direct insult could have. The humans were politely categorizing every member of the Council as their technological and evolutionary inferior. Given the evidence surrounding Brixtell's fleet, it was a categorization that might be entirely accurate. We leave behind no claims to territory or resources in this region. What we once called home is now yours to administer as you see fit. We ask only that you treat the worlds we once inhabited with the respect due to places where consciousness first learned to reach beyond its origins. The practical implications of this statement were staggering. The human solar systems contained resources that could support multiple civilizations for millennia. The infrastructure they had built, even if it was now considered primitive by their standards, represented technological capabilities that some council members couldn't match. They were simply giving it all away as if it held no value. This is our final communication through conventional channels, the message concluded. If the time comes when the Council wishes to contact us, the monuments we have left behind will provide the means. Until then, we wish you peace, prosperity, and eventual wisdom. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in profound silence. For several minutes, no one spoke as they struggled to process what they had heard. Finally, Torgon cleared his throat and made a hesitant observation. Sir, if I understand correctly, the humans just told us that they've achieved technological transcendence and are moving to a higher plane of existence because we weren't intellectually stimulating enough for them. It was a crude summary, but not entirely inaccurate. Brixtell considered the situation from multiple angles, trying to find some interpretation that didn't make the Council look like well-meaning, but primitive caretakers who had completely misunderstood their charges. Deploy the surface teams, he finally ordered. I want detailed scans of every abandoned facility. If the humans have left behind technology we can study, we need to understand what we're dealing with. The surface teams reported findings that only deepened the mystery. Human cities were indeed empty, but perfectly preserved, as if their inhabitants had simply vanished mid-activity. Food remained on tables, vehicles were parked in orderly rows, and personal possessions lay exactly where they had been left. But there were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of how billions of people had disappeared simultaneously. More disturbing were the technological artifacts that the teams discovered. Devices that seemed simple on first examination proved to operate on principles that violated established physics. Energy sources that generated power from quantum fluctuations. Transportation systems that folded space rather than moving through it. Communication arrays that transmitted information faster than light without using subspace networks. Commander, Yexandra reported during the third day of surface operations, we've discovered what appears to be a research facility beneath the Sahara Desert. The technology inside is extraordinary. The research facility was vast, extending for kilometers underground in chambers that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. The equipment within was clearly human in origin, but operated on principles that council science couldn't begin to explain. Particle accelerators that curved through dimensions that didn't exist. Quantum computers that processed information using states of matter that hadn't been discovered. Power cores that drew energy directly from the zero-point field. How long has this been here? Brixtel asked as he reviewed the visual feeds from the surface teams. Based on the construction techniques and where patterns, at least 500 years, Yexander replied. Possibly longer. This facility predates human membership in the Council by centuries. The implications were clear and deeply troubling. While the Council had been conducting routine diplomatic relations with humanity, treating them as technologically primitive newcomers to galactic civilization, the humans had been conducting research that pushed the boundaries of reality itself. They had been decades, possibly centuries, ahead of Council science, while carefully maintaining the illusion of inferiority. Sir, Torgon called from his station. We're receiving priority communications from the Council. They want immediate updates on our investigation. Brixtel considered his response carefully. How did one explain that an entire species had achieved technological transcendence while pretending to be primitive for the benefit of their supposed superiors? How did one convey that humanity had been conducting research into the fundamental nature of reality while sitting through council sessions about mining rights and trade disputes? Prepare a full report, he finally ordered. Include all sensor data, surface team findings, and recorded communications. The Council needs to understand exactly what we're dealing with. But even as he gave the order, Brixtel knew that understanding would be the least of the Council's problems. The humans hadn't just left. They had revealed that the entire foundation of galactic civilization was built on assumptions that were catastrophically wrong. If one member species could achieve this level of technological advancement while maintaining perfect secrecy, what did that say about the Council's understanding of its other members? More immediately concerning was the question of what other species might be capable of similar development. How many civilizations were sitting in council chambers, politely participating in debates about territorial boundaries and resource allocation, while secretly manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe? The investigation continued for another week, but each new discovery only confirmed what was becoming increasingly obvious. Humanity had achieved a level of technological and scientific advancement that made them effectively gods compared to the rest of the galactic community. Their departure wasn't a loss. It was a revelation that the universe was far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. As the investigation fleet prepared to return to Council space, Brixtel found himself staring at the mysterious structures in the asteroid belt. They pulsed with inner light, beautiful and incomprehensible monuments to achievements that challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of progress and civilization. Somewhere out there, humanity was continuing its journey toward understanding the deepest mysteries of existence. And here in the galaxy they had left behind, the Council was about to learn that their comfortable assumptions about the nature of reality were about to be challenged in ways they could never have imagined. The second phase of the crisis was complete, but Brixtel suspected that the real consequences were just beginning to unfold. The emergency session that followed Commander Brixtel's report was unlike anything in the Council's recorded history. For the first time in millennia, every member species sent their highest-ranking representatives, and several civilizations that rarely participated in general sessions arrived with full diplomatic delegations. The massive council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as beings from across the galaxy struggled to comprehend the implications of what they had learned. Zexhai positioned herself in the Altarian section, her crystalline form reflecting the chaotic light patterns that flickered across her skin whenever she experienced strong emotions. Around her, delegates whispered in hundreds of languages, but all their conversations centered on the same impossible truth. Humanity had achieved technological transcendence while successfully masquerading as one of the galaxy's most primitive civilizations. The full report runs to over 3,000 pages, announced Thekmore, the aged Zavari moderator whose compound eyes swept across the assembly with obvious distress. Commander Brixtel and his team have documented technological capabilities that exceed our understanding by orders of magnitude. We are facing a fundamental revision of everything we believed about the nature of scientific progress. The holographic displays throughout the chamber showed images from the abandoned human worlds. Empty cities preserved in perfect condition, impossible devices that operated on principles beyond current physics, and the mysterious crystal structures that marked humanity's former territory like monuments to achievements no one else could comprehend. I want to address the obvious question first, Thekmore continued, his voice carrying across the chamber with mechanical precision. How do we fail so completely to detect these capabilities? How did an entire species develop godlike technology while participating in our sessions as junior members? It was Delegate Korthanen from the Hegemony of Worlds who finally voiced what many were thinking. The elderly diplomat rose slowly, his forearms trembling slightly as he gripped the speaking podium. Perhaps the more relevant question, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, is whether they were hiding their capabilities from us or whether we were simply incapable of recognizing them. The silence that followed was profound. The suggestion that the Council's most advanced civilizations might be unable to recognize true technological achievement was almost as disturbing as humanity's disappearance itself. Dr. Velmon from the Nexury Science Institute requested permission to present her analysis of the recovered human technology. As the galaxy's foremost experts in theoretical physics, the Nexury had always prided themselves on their understanding of the universe's fundamental laws. But her preliminary findings suggested that those laws were far more flexible than anyone had imagined. The devices we discovered operate by manipulating what we can only describe as the quantum substrate of reality itself, she reported, her serpentine form coiled around the speaking platform in obvious distress. They don't just use energy, they restructure the mathematical foundations of space-time to achieve their effects. The assembled delegates struggled to process this information. Energy manipulation was understood technology, even if some civilizations were more advanced than others in its application. But the idea that reality itself could be rewritten at will was beyond anything in their collective experience. The implications are staggering, Dr. Velmon continued. If these principles can be mastered, then every law of physics we consider absolute becomes merely a suggestion. Matter and energy become interchangeable concepts. Time and space become tools rather than constraints. You're describing the abilities of gods, not scientists, protested Delegate Yuxtel from the Corithian Confederation. Such power is theoretically impossible for any material civilization to achieve. Yet the evidence is undeniable, Dr. Velmon replied. The humans achieved it, which means either our understanding of what's possible is fundamentally flawed, or she hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the implications of her own analysis. Or what? Demanded Thekmore. Or humanity was never a material civilization in the sense that we understand the term. Perhaps what we perceived as a primitive species struggling with basic technology was actually something far more advanced that was deliberately limiting its apparent capabilities. This possibility was even more unsettling than the idea of rapid technological advancement. It suggested that humanity had been conducting an elaborate deception for centuries, pretending to be primitive while secretly possessing abilities that could reshape reality at will. But why would any species engage in such a massive charade? Delegate Zexhai called Thekmore. Your species had extensive diplomatic contact with the humans. Did you observe anything that might support Dr. Velmon's theory? Zexhai rose slowly, her mind racing as she tried to reconcile her memories of human behavior with the evidence now before them. Sarah Chun and her fellow diplomats had always seemed genuinely committed to learning from the Council, eager to contribute whatever their species could offer to galactic civilization. Could that enthusiasm have been an elaborate performance designed to conceal their true nature? I observed dedication, intelligence, and a deep desire to understand the universe, she replied carefully. Human representatives always asked thoughtful questions, and propose creative solutions to complex problems. But if their questions were performances designed to conceal advanced knowledge, they were masterful actors. Or, suggested Delegate Morgeth from the Crystalline Consensus, perhaps their questions were genuine because they were studying us rather than the subjects we thought we were teaching them. It was an uncomfortable thought, but one that made increasing sense as delegates reviewed their interactions with human representatives. Every request for technical specifications, every proposal for joint research projects, every question about council policies could be reinterpreted as intelligence gathering conducted by a civilization that already understood far more than it revealed. The question we must address, declared Thekmore, is what this means for the future of the Council and galactic civilization. If one member species could achieve such advancement in secret, what other capabilities might exist among us undetected? This was the fear that had been lurking beneath all their discussions. If humanity could conceal godlike technology while maintaining perfect diplomatic relations, then any species could be doing the same. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for millennia could be an illusion built on complete ignorance of the true capabilities of council members. I propose immediate technological assessments of all member civilizations, announced General Trackvor from the Militant Confederation, his mechanical voice cutting through the chamber's ambient noise like a blade. We cannot maintain security if we don't understand the true capabilities of our colleagues. Absolutely not, replied Ambassador Luxandra from the Peaceful World Alliance, her musical voice carrying harmonics of distress and outrage. Such assessments would violate every principle of trust and cooperation that the Council was founded upon. We cannot allow fear to destroy the very bonds that have maintained peace among our civilizations. Fear. General Trackvor's optical sensors focused on the ambassador with laser intensity. Fear is an appropriate response when we discover that our understanding of reality has been completely wrong for centuries. If we cannot trust our own perceptions, how can we maintain any kind of meaningful cooperation? The debate that followed revealed the deep divisions that humanity's departure had opened within galactic civilization. Some species demanded immediate investigations to determine whether other members possessed hidden capabilities. Others argued that such investigations would destroy the trust and mutual respect that had allowed diverse civilizations to work together peacefully. But beneath all the political arguments lay a deeper, more troubling question. What did humanity's achievement mean for the future of all consciousness in the universe? Dr. Yelthara from the Philosophical Institute requested permission to address this broader issue. As a member of a species that had dedicated itself entirely to understanding the nature of existence and consciousness, her perspective carried weight even among civilizations that disagreed on almost everything else. We must consider the possibility, she said, her ethereal form shifting between states of matter as she spoke, that humanity's departure represents the next stage in the evolution of consciousness itself. Perhaps what we witnessed was not technological advancement in the traditional sense, but transcendence to a higher plane of existence. You're suggesting they became gods? Asked Delegate Corthanan skeptically. I'm suggesting they became something beyond our current understanding of what intelligence and consciousness can achieve. The evidence indicates that they learned to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality. Such abilities would naturally lead to questions about the nature of existence itself, about the purpose and direction of consciousness in the universe. This philosophical perspective offered a different interpretation of humanity's actions. Rather than abandoning the Council out of frustration or superiority, perhaps they had simply outgrown the constraints of normal space-time and moved on to pursue questions that could only be explored from higher planes of existence. If that's true, observed Zexai thoughtfully, then their message wasn't a goodbye. It was an invitation. They spoke of monuments that could serve as markers for other species who might choose to follow a similar path. The mysterious crystal structures in former human space took on new significance when viewed from this perspective. Rather than simple monuments to achievement, They might serve as guideposts for other civilizations that eventually developed the capability to understand them. But that raises another question, pointed out Dr. Velmont. If humanity achieved transcendence, why do they spend centuries participating in council activities? Why not simply ascend directly to whatever higher state they discovered? It was Delegate WYXterra from the ancient worlds who provided the most likely answer. Her species was among the oldest in the galaxy, with a civilization that had existed for millions of years while maintaining careful stability rather than pursuing rapid advancement. Perhaps, she suggested in the whisper-soft voice that her species used for their most serious pronouncements, they were waiting for us to join them. Perhaps their participation in the council was an extended invitation for other species to develop similar capabilities so that we could transcend together. The implications of this possibility were staggering. Had humanity spent centuries patiently waiting for their council colleagues to achieve comparable advancement? Had their enthusiastic participation in galactic civilization been motivated by hope that other species would eventually develop the capability to join them in whatever higher state they had discovered? If that's true, said Thek more slowly, then their departure represents our failure as much as their achievement. They waited as long as they could, but eventually concluded that we were not going to develop the necessary understanding within any reasonable time frame. Or perhaps, suggested Zexhai, they realized that their continued presence was actually hindering our development. If they were manipulating reality at quantum levels, their very existence in normal space might have made it impossible for the rest of us to discover those same principles. This interpretation cast humanity's departure in an even more poignant light. Rather than abandoning their colleagues out of impatience or disdain, they might have made the ultimate sacrifice, removing themselves from normal space-time to give other species the opportunity to develop similar capabilities without interference. The question remains, declared General Trakvor, what do we do now? Do we attempt to follow humanity's path toward transcendence, or do we focus on maintaining the stability we understand? It was the fundamental choice that every civilization eventually faced, security through stability or growth through exploration of the unknown. Humanity had chosen growth and achieved transcendence. Now the Council had to decide whether to follow their example or continue along their established path of careful cooperation and measure progress. I propose the formation of a joint research initiative, announced Dr. Velmont. Every species that's willing should contribute their most advanced theoretical knowledge toward understanding the principles that humanity discovered. If transcendence is possible for one consciousness, it should be possible for others. And I propose increased security protocols and careful monitoring of all member species' technological development, countered General Trakvor. We cannot allow another situation where godlike capabilities develop without our knowledge. The debate continued for hours, but it was clear that the Council was facing a fundamental schism. Some species wanted to pursue the path toward transcendence that humanity had blazed. Others wanted to maintain the stable, predictable civilization they had spent millennia building. A few were so disturbed by the implications that they began discussing withdrawal from galactic society entirely. As the session concluded without resolution, Zexhai found herself thinking about Sarah Chun and the other human representatives she had known. Had they been secretly gods walking among mortals, pretending to struggle with problems they could solve with a thought? Or had they been genuine colleagues who happened to achieve breakthrough understanding that carried them beyond normal existence? The answer probably didn't matter. What mattered was that humanity's departure had revealed the universe to be far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. The comfortable assumptions that had guided galactic civilization for millennia were gone, replaced by infinite possibilities and equally infinite dangers. The third phase of the crisis was complete, and the real consequences were just beginning to unfold across the galaxy. Some species would pursue transcendence, risking everything for the possibility of achieving humanity's elevated state. Others would retreat into security and isolation, terrified of changes they couldn't control or understand. But none of them would ever again be able to view the universe as they had before humanity's departure. The silence they had left behind was pregnant with possibilities that would reshape galactic civilization forever. 3 years had passed since humanity's departure, and the galaxy had never been the same. What began as a mysterious disappearance had evolved into a crisis that challenged the very foundation of interstellar civilization. The Galactic Council, once a symbol of unity and cooperative progress, was fragmenting along ideological lines that seemed to deepen with each passing month. Dr. HFY stood in the observation deck of the research station that had been constructed at the edge of former human space, watching the crystal monuments pulse with their incomprehensible energy patterns. As the leader of Project Transcendence, she commanded resources from 17 different species, all united in their determination to understand and possibly replicate humanity's achievements. Any progress with the quantum resonance experiments? She asked Dr. Kethmarin, a brilliant Nexary physicist whose serpentine form was coiled around a complex array of instruments that hummed with barely contained power. Some, he replied, though his tone suggested frustration more than optimism. We've managed to create localized distortions in space-time, but nothing approaching the scale or precision of human technology. It's as if we're missing some fundamental principle that makes their achievements possible. The research team had made significant advances in their understanding of quantum mechanics and reality manipulation, but every breakthrough only emphasized how far ahead humanity had been. The simplest human devices operated on principles that pushed the boundaries of what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could comprehend, let alone replicate. Dr. HFY called Specialist Vorthek from the communication station. We're receiving reports from the Outer Rim monitoring stations. 3 more species have attempted to access the crystal monuments directly. This had become an increasingly common occurrence. Despite clear warnings about the dangerous energies involved, various species continued to send expeditions to the crystal structures that mark humanity's former territory. Most returned with nothing more than sensor readings and theoretical data, but a few had achieved direct contact with consequences that no one fully understood. What were the results? HFY asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. 2 expeditions were repelled by what appeared to be protective energy fields. The third, Vorthek hesitated. The third appears to have been successful. The Ethereal Collective's exploration vessel made contact with one of the larger monuments and then disappeared. It was becoming a disturbingly familiar outcome. Over the past 3 years, 7 ships and their crews had vanished after achieving direct contact with the crystal structures. No wreckage, no distress signals, no evidence of what had happened to them. They simply ceased to exist in normal space-time. Any communication from them before they disappeared? HFY inquit? Yes, but it was unusual. They reported that the monument was responding to their presence, showing them visions of possible futures and alternative realities. Their final transmission mentioned something about being offered a choice between remaining in normal space or joining humanity's journey toward ultimate understanding. HFY felt her crystalline skin flicker with patterns of unease. The Ethereal Collective was one of the more advanced council species, with technology that approached some of humanity's simpler achievements. If they had been offered the choice to transcend, it suggested that the monuments served as more than simple markers. They were active gateways to whatever realm humanity now inhabited. Have we heard anything from the other missing expeditions? Nothing directly, Vorthek replied. But there have been reports of strange phenomena near their last known positions. Gravitational anomalies, temporal distortions, and energy signatures that don't match any known technology. These phenomena were becoming increasingly common throughout the galaxy as the effects of humanity's departure spread outward like ripples in a cosmic pond. Some systems experience time dilation effects that age their inhabitants years in the span of days. others discovered that the laws of physics had become subtly different, allowing for technological capabilities that had previously been impossible. The most unsettling reports came from civilizations that claimed to have received messages from the missing expeditions. These communications described existence in higher dimensions where consciousness could reshape reality through will alone, where time and space were merely variables in equations that could be rewritten at whim. But the messages also carried warnings about the cost of such transcendence, the complete abandonment of material existence, and everything that defined normal life. Dr. Zexhai interrupted Dr. Yelthessa from the Deep Physics Laboratory. We need to discuss the latest findings from our analysis of human technology. I'm afraid the implications are more disturbing than we initially realized. Zexhai made her way to the laboratory, where her research team had been attempting to reverse engineer the devices left behind in human facilities. The work was painstaking and dangerous, as several pieces of equipment had demonstrated the ability to manipulate reality in unexpected ways when activated. "What have you discovered?" she asked. Dr. Yelthessa, a member of the Philosophical Institute whose shifting form reflected her species' deep connection to abstract thought, gestured toward a holographic display showing the internal structure of a human quantum computer. "The device doesn't just process information," she explained. "It processes potential realities. Each calculation explores multiple timeline variations simultaneously, selecting the most favorable outcome, and then implementing changes to ensure that reality conforms to the desired result." The implications hit Zexhai like a physical blow. If human technology could manipulate the outcome of events by selecting preferred timelines, then everything they understood about causality and free will was suspect. "You're saying they could alter the past to create better futures?" "More than that," Dr. Yelthessa replied. "I'm saying they could select which reality they wanted to exist from among infinite possibilities. They weren't just advanced. They were actively choosing what version of the universe they experienced." This revelation cast humanity's departure in an entirely new light. Perhaps they hadn't transcended to a higher plane of existence, so much as they had learned to navigate between parallel realities, selecting the versions of themselves that achieved whatever goals they pursued. Their disappearance might not be permanent. They could be existing in a reality where their departure had different consequences or where their relationship with the Council had developed along different lines. "Have we considered the possibility," suggested Dr. Kethmarin, "that we're not in the same reality where humanity originally existed? Perhaps their departure was so fundamental that it created a branching point, and we're now experiencing a timeline where they never achieved transcendence." It was a deeply disturbing thought, but one that explained many of the inconsistencies they had observed. If reality itself was malleable, then their memories of human interaction, their understanding of human capabilities, and even their perception of the current situation might all be artifacts of existing in a modified timeline. That would mean, Zexhai realized, that our entire investigation could be based on false assumptions. We might be trying to replicate achievements that never occurred in our current reality. The research team fell silent as they contemplated the philosophical implications. If consciousness could select which reality to experience, then concepts like truth, progress, and even existence itself became matters of choice rather than objective facts. The stable universe they had believed in was revealed to be merely one option among infinite possibilities. Dr. Zexhai called Vorthek from the communication center, priority message from the council chambers. "They want immediate updates on our research progress." Zexhai sighed, her luminescence dimming with fatigue and frustration. The council was growing increasingly impatient with Project Transcendence, especially as other member species began experiencing the strange phenomena that seemed to be spreading outward from humanity's former territory. Political pressure was mounting for practical solutions to problems that might not have practical solutions. "Prepare a summary report," she instructed. "Include our latest findings, but emphasized that we're dealing with principles that challenge our fundamental understanding of reality itself. But even as she gave the instruction, Zexhai knew that the council leadership wouldn't be satisfied with academic explanations. They wanted concrete answers to immediate problems, not philosophical discussions about the nature of existence. The gap between what the research teams were discovering and what the political leadership could understand was growing wider every day. The communication link activated, revealing Thekmore's compound eyes staring out from the council chambers with obvious stress and exhaustion. Behind him, Zexhai could see other delegates engaged in heated debates that had become increasingly common as the crisis deepened. Dr. Zexhai, the moderator, began, "We need practical solutions. 3 more systems have reported temporal anomalies this week, and the Merchant Federation is threatening to withdraw from the Council entirely if we can't explain what's happening to their trade routes." "Respected moderator," Zexhai replied carefully, "our research indicates that the phenomena you're describing are consequences of humanity's manipulation of fundamental reality structures. The effects are spreading because the changes they made to space-time are propagating outward at quantum levels. In terms that a politician can understand, please," Thekmore said with barely concealed impatience. "Are these effects dangerous? Can they be stopped? And what does this mean for galactic civilization?" Zexhai took a moment to organize her thoughts. How could she explain that reality itself was becoming unstable without causing panic that would destroy whatever remained of galactic civilization? "The effects appear to be stabilizing rather than intensifying," she said, which was technically true even if it wasn't the complete story. "We believe that humanity designed their departure to minimize disruption to existing civilizations. The phenomena you're observing are temporary adjustments as space-time adapts to their absence." "What about the missing expeditions? Are they dead?" "We don't believe so. Evidence suggests they've transcended to whatever state humanity achieved. They're not dead. They've moved beyond normal space-time." Thekmore's expression suggested that he found this explanation less than reassuring. From a political standpoint, losing entire expeditions to transcendence was almost worse than losing them to conventional destruction. "Dr. Zexhai, I need you to be completely honest with me. Based on your research, what is the likely future for galactic civilization? Are we facing extinction? Transformation? Something else entirely?" It was the question she had been dreading, because the honest answer was that she didn't know. Humanity's achievements had revealed the universe to be far stranger and more malleable than anyone had imagined, but the long-term consequences of that revelation were impossible to predict. "We're facing a choice," she replied finally. "We can attempt to follow humanity's path toward transcendence, with all the risks and uncertainties that entails. We could try to maintain our current level of civilization while adapting to the new conditions that humanity's departure has created. Or we can retreat into isolation and hope that the changes don't affect us." "And your recommendation?" Zexhai considered the question carefully. As a scientist, she was fascinated by the possibilities that humanity had revealed. As a conscious being, she was terrified by the implications of abandoning everything that defined existence as she understood it. "I recommend that we continue our research while preparing for multiple possibilities," she said. "Some species may choose transcendence when they understand what it entails. Others may prefer to remain in normal space-time. The key is ensuring that the choice is made with full understanding of the consequences." The communication ended, leaving Zexhai alone with her thoughts and the impossible task of understanding achievements that challenged the nature of existence itself. Outside the observation windows, the crystal monuments continued their eternal dance of light and energy, beacons that marked the path to possibilities that might be too wonderful or too terrible for mortal consciousness to comprehend. Humanity had departed in silence, but their legacy was reshaping the galaxy in ways that no one could have predicted. The 4th phase of the crisis was reaching its climax, and soon every species in the galaxy would have to choose between the safety of ignorance and the terrifying possibilities of transcendence 5 years after humanity's departure. The galaxy had transformed in ways that no prophecy could have predicted. The Galactic Council, once a unified government spanning thousands of star systems, had fractured into three distinct factions, each pursuing a different response to the crisis that humanity's transcendence had created. Dr. Zexai found herself at the center of the most ambitious project in galactic history as the leader of the Transcendence Alliance, a coalition of 63 species that had committed themselves to following humanity's path toward higher existence. The research station she commanded had grown into a massive complex that dwarfed most planetary cities, its laboratories and experimental facilities pushing the boundaries of what consciousness could achieve. Final systems check complete, announced Dr. Keth Marin, whose serpentine form had been modified with quantum interface implants that allowed direct neural connection to their most advanced experimental equipment. The Ascension Gate is ready for its first full-scale test. The Ascension Gate represented 5 years of intensive research and development, incorporating principles reverse-engineered from human technology with innovations that pushed far beyond anything their former colleagues had achieved. If their calculations were correct, the massive device could open a portal to the higher dimensional space where humanity now existed, allowing direct communication and possibly transit between realities. "Are you certain the containment fields will hold?" asked Dr. Yelthessa, whose philosophical insights had been crucial to understanding the metaphysical implications of their work. "The energy levels we're dealing with could reshape local space-time if they get out of control." "As certain as we can be when dealing with forces that rewrite the laws of physics," Keth Marin replied. "But, Dr. Zexai, I need to ask one more time. Are you absolutely sure about this? Once we activate the gate, there's no predicting what the consequences might be." Zexai stood before the viewing window that overlooked the gate's massive construction, her crystalline form reflecting the swirling energies that danced across its surface. The device was beautiful in an alien way, its curved surfaces and impossible geometries seeming to exist in more dimensions than normal space could contain. But beauty had never been their goal, understanding was. "For 5 years, we've struggled to comprehend what humanity achieved," she said, her voice carrying across the control center with quiet determination. "We've analyzed their technology, studied their monuments, and theorized about their transcendence. But theory has its limits. If we want true understanding, we need direct contact." The risks were enormous. Previous attempts to access higher dimensional space had resulted in the loss of 17 research vessels and their crews. The energies involved were so intense that they could destabilize entire star systems if mishandled. But the potential rewards, contact with humanity and access to transcendent knowledge, justified almost any risk. "Initiating preliminary power sequence," announced Specialist Torgon from his position at the primary control console. "All monitoring stations report ready status." Throughout the research complex, thousands of scientists and technicians prepared for what might be the most important moment in galactic history. Representatives from allied species monitored the proceedings through quantum communication links, ready to shut down the experiment if it threatened to spread beyond the designated test area. But they were not the only ones watching. On the far side of the galaxy, the Preservation Coalition, a union of species that rejected transcendence in favor of maintaining traditional civilization, tracked the experiment through their own monitoring networks. Their leader, General Trakvor of the Militant Confederation, had publicly declared the Transcendence Alliance a threat to galactic stability and had promised intervention if their experiments endangered other worlds. Between the two extremes lay the neutral zone, a loose confederation of species that had chosen to isolate themselves from both factions while they waited to see which path would prove viable. These civilizations had withdrawn from galactic politics entirely, focusing on developing defensive technologies that could protect them from whatever consequences might emerge from the growing conflict between transcendence and preservation. "Power levels approaching critical threshold," Torgon reported. "Quantum field fluctuations are within acceptable parameters, but we're detecting space-time distortions at increasing distances from a gate. The distortions were expected, but still concerning. Reality itself was beginning to bend around the massive energies they were manipulating, creating pockets of altered physics where the normal laws of the universe no longer applied. Within these zones, matter behaved differently, time moved at variable rates, and consciousness could directly influence physical phenomena. Dr. Zexhai, called Dr. Velmont from the Deep Physics Laboratory, were receiving some kind of signal from the gate itself. It's not electromagnetic or subspace. It appears to be transmitting directly into our quantum consciousness interfaces. This was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. Human technology had demonstrated the ability to communicate through quantum consciousness manipulation, bypassing normal sensory channels to transmit information directly to the mind. If their gate was successfully connecting to transcendent space, it might be picking up communications from humanity itself. Can you decode the signal? Working on it, Dr. Velmont replied, her next reform coiling around a complex array of quantum interface devices. The transmission is incredibly complex, containing what appears to be multidimensional data structures that my mind can barely process. Give me a few minutes. As the gate's power levels continued to rise, the effects on local space-time became increasingly dramatic. Gravity fluctuated in waves that made the research station's artificial gravity systems struggle to maintain stability. Light bent around the device in impossible patterns that hurt to look at directly. And throughout the complex, sensitive individuals began reporting visions of possible futures and alternative realities. Signal decoded, Dr. Velmont announced, though her voice carried overtones of awe and confusion. It's from humanity. They're welcoming us to transcendence and offering guidance for our journey. Can you establish two-way communication? I think so, but Dr. Zexhai, you need to understand, they're not entirely human anymore. The consciousness I'm detecting has expanded beyond anything we can readily comprehend. They exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously, experiencing all possible versions of reality at once. Despite the warnings, Zexhai felt excitement building within her crystalline form. After 5 years of theoretical research and failed experiments, they were finally going to achieve direct contact with transcendent consciousness. Whatever humanity had become, they retained enough connection to their origins to offer guidance to other species seeking to follow their path. Open the channel, she commanded. The voice that filled the control center was recognizably that of Sarah Chun, but transformed by experiences that no material consciousness could fully understand. It resonated not just through the air, but through the quantum substrate of reality itself, carrying harmonics of meaning that bypassed normal language to communicate directly with the listener's deepest understanding. My dear friends, the voice began, we are honored by your dedication and impressed by your achievements. You have accomplished in 5 years what took us centuries to develop. But before you proceed further, you must understand what transcendence truly means. The communication was accompanied by visions that appeared directly in the minds of everyone in the control center. They saw humanity as it existed now. Consciousness expanded across dimensions, experiencing reality as a malleable medium that could be shaped through will and understanding. They witnessed the incredible beauty and infinite possibilities that transcendence offered, but they also saw the price. To achieve such expansion, humanity had sacrificed everything that defined material existence. They no longer possessed physical forms, individual identities, or emotional connections in any sense that other species could recognize. They existed as pure consciousness exploring the deepest mysteries of existence, but they had lost all connection to the simpler pleasures and relationships that made life meaningful for material beings. Transcendence is not an achievement to be celebrated lightly. Chen's transformed voice continued. It is the ultimate transformation, one that cannot be reversed once undertaken. You will gain infinite knowledge and unlimited power over reality, but you will lose everything that currently defines who you are. Dr. Zexhai felt her determination waver as the full implications became clear. The Research Alliance had assumed that transcendence would be an addition to their existing capabilities rather than a replacement for their current form of existence. The idea that achieving humanity's level of advancement required abandoning everything they currently valued was profoundly disturbing. "Is there no middle path?" she asked through the quantum communication link. "No way to gain transcendent understanding while maintaining some connection to material existence?" "Many have asked that question," Chen replied, her voice carrying overtones of sadness that transcended normal emotion. "We explored every possible alternative during our own development. But consciousness cannot exist simultaneously in material and transcendent states. The choice must be absolute. Remain as you are with all the limitations that entails, or transform completely into something beyond current comprehension." The visions continued, showing other species that had achieved transcendence throughout the galaxy's history. Each had faced the same choice, and each had ultimately chosen either complete transformation or continued existence within material constraints. There was no compromise position that preserved the benefits of both states. However, Chun continued, transcendence is not the only path toward advancement. Material consciousness can achieve remarkable things within its constraints if it chooses to pursue knowledge and understanding rather than mere power. Your species have barely begun to explore what's possible within normal space-time. But the phenomena spreading across the galaxy, Dr. Kethmarin interjected, the temporal anomalies and reality distortions. How do we deal with those without transcendent capabilities? "Those effects are temporary," Chen assured them. "Reality is adapting to our absence and will stabilize within a few decades. The distortions you observe are growing pains as the universe adjusts to new conditions, not permanent threats to material existence." This revelation brought relief, but also raised new questions. If the cosmic disturbances were temporary, then the urgent need for transcendence that had driven 5 years of intensive research might be based on false assumptions. "You're saying we don't need to transcend to survive the changes you've caused?" "Survival was never in question," Chen replied. "Material consciousness is far more resilient than most species realize. The universe is vast enough to accommodate multiple forms of existence without conflict. Our transcendence creates opportunities for growth and exploration within material constraints rather than necessitating transformation." "Then, why did you leave?" asked Dr. Yelthessa, her philosophical mind struggling to understand humanity's motivations. "If material existence offers so many possibilities, why choose transcendence?" "Because questions exist that cannot be answered from within material constraints," Chen explained. "The deepest mysteries of existence, the nature of consciousness itself, the purpose of the universe, the relationship between mind and reality, can only be explored from transcendent states. We chose to pursue those questions, even knowing the price." The communication continued for several hours, with humanity sharing insights about reality manipulation, consciousness expansion, and the techniques that material species could use to achieve remarkable advancement without requiring transcendence. They offered detailed guidance for developing technologies that could reshape local spacetime while maintaining the limitations that define material existence. But perhaps most importantly, they provided perspective on the choice that every sufficiently advanced species eventually faced. Transcendence offered infinite knowledge and power at the cost of everything that made individual existence meaningful. Material consciousness offered limited but genuine experience, relationships, and growth within comprehensible boundaries. "The choice you face," Chin concluded, "is not between advancement and stagnation, but between different types of advancement. Each path offers unique rewards and requires unique sacrifices." Choose based on what your species values most deeply, not on fear or misunderstanding of the alternatives. As the communication ended and the gate's power levels gradually decreased, Dr. Zexhai found herself facing a decision that would determine the future of the Transcendence Alliance and possibly the entire galaxy. They had achieved their goal of contacting humanity, but the answers they received had changed the fundamental nature of the choice they faced. "What do we do now?" asked Dr. Kethmarin, his quantum-enhanced consciousness still processing the vast amount of information they had received. "We think," Zexhai replied. "We consider what we've learned, what our species truly value, and what kind of future we want to build. Humanity has given us the gift of informed choice. Now we must decide how to use it." The Ascension Gate powered down completely, its purpose fulfilled in ways that no one had anticipated. Instead of providing a path to transcendence, it had revealed that the real choice was between different ways of being conscious in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. In the days that followed, news of the contacts spread throughout the galaxy, reaching even the isolated worlds of the Neutral Zone and the militant systems of the Preservation Coalition. Humanity's message offered hope to those who feared transcendence and wisdom to those who sought it. But it also placed the responsibility for choice squarely on every species that heard it. Some civilizations chose to pursue the material advancement techniques that humanity had shared, developing capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what was possible within normal space-time. Others decided that transcendence was worth its price and began the careful process of preparing their consciousness for ultimate transformation. But most chose a third path that hadn't existed before: exploration of the vast middle ground between primitive material existence and transcendent consciousness. They developed technologies that enhanced awareness and capability while preserving the relationships and experiences that made life meaningful. Dr. Zexhai stood once again before the now silent gate, her crystalline form reflecting the gentle light of distant stars. Humanity had departed in silence, but their legacy had become a conversation that would continue for millennia as conscious beings throughout the galaxy explored the infinite possibilities of existence. The crisis was over, replaced by opportunity. Humanity's remorse couldn't save them from the isolation that transcendence required, but their wisdom could guide.